Welcome, snack cakes, to Dusk, a two-lit podcast. I am your host, Cosette, and today I am joined by our first ever guest, Morgan.
Hey.
So we thought we would start this podcast just to have a little bit more of a personal interaction with our fan base and talk about kind of what we're doing, what led to Dusk becoming a thing, and gaining international kind of a fan basis, and where we're going and all of that fun stuff. And just to kind of get to know you guys and what you're interested in and what you want to see us do in the future. So yeah, Morgan, introduce yourself, and let's get into it.
Hello, my name is Morgan. I, I I'm the problem. No, I wrote the script for Dusk and co-wrote lyrics, and then I also directed and choreographed the workshop production and the Fringe show that you guys have seen.
Yes, so Morgan was our
Anything
fearless
else?
leader. No, I'll ask you some more questions in a little bit, but Morgan was our fearless leader. I played Ara in the Fringe World's debut cast of Dusk, and I am the one who had the crazy idea to do a podcast like any other self-respecting 20-something in the year of our Lord 2024. So, just a little bit of heads up to all of our viewers slash listeners that what this show is kind of going to consist of is we plan on releasing a series of episodes instead of doing just continuous seasons. And we are going to have a little bit of a structure. And it all kind of corresponds to Dusk slash our source material, which we'll get into in a little bit. So pretty straightforward and simple for this first episode, of just asking Morgan some questions about what it was like to have Twilight take up so much real estate in your brain for the last however many years it has been. So we've sourced some questions from Instagram as well as from other members of the cast and community. And I'm just going to rapid fire throw them at you and let's just have a little convo about all things Dusk that the people want to know. First of all, just tell us how all of this came to be.
So this came to be, I think, I mean, we've been asked this so many times, and the answer that we've always given is just it started as a joke, and then it kind of spiraled out of control, took on a life of its own, and now we're here. But I can provide a little bit more in depth of an answer. I think largely it did start as a joke. I was just kind of messing around with a friend of mine on another project I was working on, and it became, you know how you take on like kind of those like inside jokes, but it's very sarcastic and it has no like actual weight behind it. So you could be like, oh, like I'm going to space or something, like stupid stuff like that. I was like, oh, I'm writing a Twilight parody musical. And it, well, like we had kind of joked about what the baseball scene would look like, but weren't serious. Like I never intended to actually do that. I had thought of it before. I think I could see Twilight as a musical. I didn't intend to be involved in that at all. I I typically don't prefer to write parody, but I was joking about it in front of someone who became then our producer and costume and set designer for Dusk to this point. And her energy is just kind of like, oh yeah, let's do it. Like about everything, which is refreshing and fun and very encouraging. But I didn't really like expect that she meant it as much as she meant it. So I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll bring you the script like Thursday or whatever. And then I did, but it was absolutely as a joke, only for like those few people. And we didn't really intend to go further with it than doing like, oh, I mean, I didn't intend to go further with it than those couple people read it and whatever. But then they kind of said like, oh, well, maybe like we can put it together if you guys want and do a version of this for a festival that's here and stuff. And we thought about doing that. And then we're like, yeah, maybe. But then I think it was only like 2 days later someone else involved in that production was like, well, how about instead you do it in February at the university that we did the workshop at, and then maybe take it to Fringe with the university next summer. And so that, I mean, like, it started as something I wrote in 3 hours, just kind of like messing around, to like 3-4 days later, oh, let's take it to the Fringe Festival, which I knew about, but I didn't know how big of a deal Fringe was. I think it's something that unless you've experienced it, you will never grasp. Insanity that is Fringe Festival. So I was like, yeah, I mean, sure, because the friend who I had worked on it with, I mean, the friend who I had joked about it with, who had kind of been like, are you sure about, like, crazy for making this joke, had been to Fringe before with the program that we were thinking about taking the show with and all of that. And it was like, okay, like, kind of not saying do it or don't do it, but just kind of like there for the chaos. And I didn't know what I was getting into at all. And I think maybe that was a good thing because there's no way to prepare for what 2023 ended up being. That was all in April of 2022. And I mean, it went from nothing to something that was going to Scotland with like within 3 or 4 days. And I didn't have original music and needed a composer and all of that. So then the next step was finding a composer and then putting it all together and changing it a million times and all of that with a really strict deadline of, I think it was like 8 or 10 months or something until the workshop opened. Or maybe it was like from the time the first draft was written to like when the workshop closed was a total of 10 months. And then a lot of things changed and we were pursuing Fringe independently. So then also trying to get that sorted and we ended up holding international an open casting call, which we posted on TikTok and Instagram, not really knowing where that was going to go, and on Backstage. And we ended up with the perfect people that we needed for the show. But I don't know, it was just a very chaotic process from start to now, which lends itself well to the nature of the show. So
it does.
yeah.
And somehow we're in 2024 and talking about the future and have a podcast now.
It's like I don't remember the last 3 or 4 years of my life, and that was only 2 of them.
It's been a glittery, dramatic fever dream, I am sure. But
Yeah.
you did start talking a little bit about needing original music, and
Yes.
maybe the people want to know a little bit of how you and Dan became such an iconic duo.
So we have a mutual friend. It became apparent there were so many things that I was lacking to try to put together any sort of full-length production to this point. Like, I grew up doing theater in the Chicagoland area, so I had a familiarity with like the whole process and how things get put together, and had performed in a number of original shows before, but I had been working as a choreographer for the past 5 years, and that's kind of where my focus lied. And I was happy to work on something else. Like, I love writing and have always done that as a hobby, but not for the stage. So this was all kind of new and something I was excited about learning, but the pace of it was just like so accelerated. But anyway, so I think that all started in April, and by early June, that was the end of April, early June, I was like, I still don't have a composer and I have no idea how to fund this. Like, I don't know anything. And all of a sudden I have this responsibility, and like stuff with work was changing and all of this stuff. So it was very chaotic. And I ended up going to a like artistic grant informational session at my local library. And one of my friends who I didn't know had moved back into town was running the session. So afterwards I was like, first of all, hey, great to see you. Second of all, do you know any composers? Like, very
Yeah.
and she's like, oh my God, hang on. And then within like minutes, she was talking to somebody else and handing me her phone and had me on a Snapchat call. I was like, he's in London, he's incredible. I called him, whatever she said, she called him, and I was like, what do I call? I don't know him. So she's handing me the phone. She's like, go talk. And I was like, "Oh, okay." Just kind of walking around the library, whispering into the phone, trying to explain, like, so there's this Twilight Parody musical, and like, I heard you're a composer, like, what? And he's on the other end. Apparently, it's like 2, 3 a.m. there. He was in England at the time, going, "Oh my God, this is fate." And I'm like, "What?" Okay. So do you want to do it? Like, I can send more information if you want, like all of that. And then that's kind of how it got started. After that, I sent a message and I guess it was the wrong number and stuff, so didn't hear back. So I was like, this isn't gonna work. What's gonna happen? But it turns out that it was just the wrong number. So then we got in touch on Instagram, and it's kind of all been so much better since, because we needed music. So and Dan was for it. I think people would know his John and Marble stuff. So he's used to writing like parody comedy sort of music. And I don't know, just brought such a fresh perspective to everything. So I think it's been great. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, definitely a key point of being a musical is having music. So that was a big roadblock for you to overcome at the beginning there.
Well, there was a time in the very beginning when I was like, oh, okay, because it was absolutely like, it was never going to be performed. It was not written to be performed initially, right? Like, it was just a joke. So I used a lot of stuff from, I went like writing the script. I was like, oh, okay, like this song, and it was all kind of based around, the whole show was based around how iconic the music from the Twilight soundtracks are in the baseball scene. Like, otherwise we wouldn't have this, because like that's the stuff we were joking about. And there were certain songs that I was like, okay, so it has to be like this feel, this vibes, whatever. And then I ended up changing it to be like songs inspired by the sound of this or that or whatever. So it was something that I could give to a composer and they could come up with something. But
I know,
yeah, licensing, we ended up looking into that. And I was like, no, never.
We had a conversation a little while ago, and you kind of jokingly in passing said, my life has been Twilight and explaining Twilight to people for the last 2 years. So has there ever been a moment or moments that you would like to bring up where the cringe factor was just way too much to handle? I can think of one moment off the top of my head in rehearsals for the Fringe, but I would love to know your experience.
Well, before I get into it, what was the moment?
So there was a moment in rehearsals where Bea and Edwin kiss in her bedroom for the first time, and it's supposed to take a while. And it just took so much longer than a while that one time. And they really, really milked it for approximately 10 minutes. And all of us were so uncomfortable. We all were just like squealing and grabbing each other and freaking out. And some people had to legitimately leave the room because they were just absolutely dying, trying not to laugh with every fiber of their being.
So was that the first time that you guys all saw that scene?
I think it was.
Okay. I think so, because I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, we were still in the music cottage and we like told everyone, like, you can sit and watch this, because we had already blocked it and wanted to make sure people got like the giggles out if there were any before we were performing it during the runs and stuff, like the dress rehearsals and everything. Because another thing I guess we could talk about with the accelerated process was that we had a week in person with everyone to rehearse.
Yeah.
Well, we should get into the timeline after all this, but yes, so that's a really cringy one. And in the script, I'm pretty sure it says specifically like hold longer for tension, and everyone in the audience should feel like they want to leave, but it's too uncomfortable to move, so they can't, like, which they nailed it. It was good.
They did that scene so well. And there were some nights where we were like, hey guys, we're gonna get kicked out of this venue.
Oh yeah.
If you guys take any longer on this.
So you get to a point, because we have done, by the time the run was over, it was 27 performances and like a week of rehearsal and stuff. So the show had been done so many times, but nothing was like those first few times running certain scenes because the awkwardness was so real and so there in so many moments. And I wish we could capture that and carry it throughout everything. But yeah, that I know what you're talking about for sure. And there were a lot of moments because Dylan's been with us since the beginning. He played Edwin in the workshop as well, but wasn't familiar with the source material at all. Like no familiarity with Twilight. That's actually a common theme. So many people from the workshop had no idea. And then I don't think that was the case. I think it was just Dylan and Anthony who were still like, during Fringe about certain parts. But yeah, there was something. I remember one conversation in particular with Dylan where I had to sit him down. He played Edwin for the listeners who don't know, but where I had to sit him down and like explain to him the motivation behind the character because he's like, why is this dude so sad all the time? And then so I'm going through it and like, okay, this is what he's thinking here. And like we were just having a conversation about character and stuff. And having to say any of that out loud, because like I had read the books and seen the movies and stuff as they were coming out, was like, I don't know. I think the thing for me with Twilight has always been trying to understand the phenomenon behind it. Because I read the first book when I was 11 and it terrified me. It was kind of like as the books. So this, I think maybe like the second and third were out. I know for a fact the fourth one came out this summer between like when I was in 6th and 7th grade. And so I read the book and my friends hadn't yet. Like it was a year before the movies came out. And my peers were kind of just still like Percy Jackson and things like that. And I liked all of that too, but I think I found it in the library and I read it and was horrified by the thought of like someone could come in your window. I didn't see it as romance at all. I was reading it and I was like, that was the only point that stood out to me. And then it got popular amongst my peers and I needed to understand because it was also like the parents too. Like my mom was reading it and loved it. I remember the movie came out and she was still reading the book, so she couldn't see it until like she finished the book. And we were on vacation and my dad and I went to see Twilight and he was like, is this like a horror movie? And I was like, no, it shouldn't. No, he was like, is it gonna be scary? And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I don't know. And my mom and siblings went to see Bolt. Like this comes up a lot because they reference Bolt and apparently I missed something there because I still haven't seen it. And they're like, oh yeah, when we saw Bolt, and I was like, I didn't see that. I saw Twilight. But anyway, my dad was so invested in Charlie and the baseball scene that I was like, oh, okay. Maybe this is something like it's like a family thing now because my parents are both into it and whatever. But there were so many things that I think I struggled to appreciate in the same way certain people were. I think I know now that's like a lot to do with neurodivergence and all these other things. But at the time, I was just really like trying to understand the phenomenon and it went on for years and it has always plagued me. So I've made fun of Twilight a lot throughout my life. So it felt like natural to be writing the script for it and always cringy. Like there was never a point where it was not cringy. That was the intention, right? Like that was like my main takeaway. I was like, this is a cringe that people love so desperately. And I had like growing up, I'd be like, it's come time I revisit Twilight now and see like, do I understand more and all of that and finding the points of humanity in there. And I think, I mean, there are definitely moments, and I get it now as an adult, why people liked that for the escapism and all of that. So I hope that the show reads as a loving critique. And as we revise again, going forward, I think that that's going to be a lot more apparent. But yes, the cringe did become too much. Approximately 3 months into the project. And I needed to start working on other things at the same time. Like I was like, if I don't have something grounded that is happening like congruently to like working on this show, I will lose my mind. And I only had time to do that for a little bit, but like the contrast between the types of projects I've been working on while working on Dusk are insane. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is like, Dusk is just the genre it's in and everything. Like it's very chaotic and campy and ridiculous. And there's not a lot of like, I'm very passionate about compassionate and honest storytelling. And I think that it's hard to do that with characters that are caricatures and don't feel real to me as much. So while working on Dusk, yes, it became cringy pretty much right away. And then I just started writing the most depressing shit that I've ever written in my life. But that feels more. Like it feels real to me, right? Like, and I needed that balance as much as I could. But then I think by the time the workshop was like about to open in that last month, it became so insane that everything else went out the window. And I don't know, Dusk became all consuming until like a month ago. And I do think that that was a little too much for any person to handle. Just like that amount, like imagine waking. I'm sure maybe people do this because they want to, but like being forced to wake up and think about Twilight every day, and then also think about a more chaotic, ridiculous version of it that doesn't have the points of nuance and humanity as much, it becomes a lot, especially like with everything else in life, you know?
I would say from an
Like,
acting perspective, waking up every day for that month and a half when we were in rehearsals through the performance process, that
hmm.
was a lot. Being like, today my job is Twilight. My job is
Yeah, I
Twilight
mean,
parody.
I I think it's just a tough genre, and I think anyone who like comedians will say or anyone, but like there are days when you wake up and you don't feel like being funny or being
Yeah.
happy or whatever. Like it's hard to force yourself into that mindset. And especially like having life outside of that, but then just the timeline we were on, like there wasn't a lot of room to stop ever. And there was no room to stop ever and like take a break and try to do anything else or like decompress it all. And I've learned so much about myself, but the creative process and all of these other things through working on this project. And one of the more apparent ones, I think, for everyone involved was how necessary rest is, not even just for yourself, but for the work too. Like the work needs to rest before you can come back to it and make it what it needs to be, um, or to like see it clearly, you know? So yes, the cringe became so much. Um, I would challenge, no, I don't want anyone to actually do this, but I would say challenge your mindset of being in 2 straight years of just and like silliness. It's hard. I think everyone that has been involved has done such a great job of bringing like so much life to the project. But I would like us to go slower from now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that that's a beautiful assessment of the cringe that we all experienced and kind of navigated over the process.
Did you feel the cringe like being in costume? Because I mean the space that we were performing the space we were performing in was not very private. Like the Fringe Festival is not like it's all shared venues and stuff and performance spaces. So during a performance, you might have like 4 other shows going on in the same building, but meaning like the hallways that you'd walk in that were like your backstage, there were just people there like all the time and you're just walking around in costume. Did you feel almost like you're cosplaying and then very publicly?
Kind of the mental game of the Fringe was a really interesting experience because you're in the space and you're acting and you're performing and you're on, and as soon as you get in the space you're on and you're go 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 go, and then you go off that stage for, you've got to run around to the other side of the stage, and all of a sudden you're confronted with people carrying a casket up 6 flights of stairs, or someone wearing a giant feather boa dress and absolutely nothing else, or a drag queen and it's 11 in the morning, and you're just like, how do I navigate the energy that I need to maintain to get me to the other side of the stage and finish out this show when all of this
Mhm.
beautiful chaos is happening at the same time? And sometimes we had other things happening while the show was happening at the same time, and we were dealing with a lot of the bureaucracy of the Fringe and a lot of the interpersonal things, dealing with the other performers in other spaces, and navigating a space that is not a theater day in and day out, and
Yeah.
navigating a space that is shared by other organizations during the busiest time of the year for Edinburgh, which I think would probably really connect well with my next question, which is, what was it like sustaining an international collaboration?
Yeah. Well, I think the pace of everything, though it was like incredibly chaotic and not sustainable whatsoever, really helped with stuff like that because there was no time to think like, how do we do this? It just everything was so instinctual and it was like, well, this is how it has to happen. And then I there are certain things like, yes, absolutely, we will be doing differently going forward. But I do think most of that really worked. Like, you're like, well, we want anyone who wants to be involved to be able to be involved. Like, the source material belongs to everyone. Like, it means so much and such different stuff to different people that we're like, well, this is like for everybody, right? And so the workshop performance ran through the end of February in Pennsylvania. It's like random, but we were performing at a university, and then we posted a couple clips on TikTok that went viral, and so many people were like, "Oh, I'm in Australia. Like, I wish I could be involved in this. I'm here. I'm there. Whatever." We saw that as a great opportunity for Fringe to be able to invite people to be involved. So we held this international casting call. Not really sure like what the turnout was going to be like and stuff, but it felt right and necessary to open it up that way. And we are like, we'll just make it work. Like it's going to be the right people who need to be here for this are going to be the people that are here. And that was absolutely true. We had, I think, 8 different countries represented throughout with our Fringe team. And that was like some of our orchestrators were in South America. We have cast member from Australia, a lot of people from the UK. It's really spread out, and then several different time zones within the US as well. So we had one heck of a time coordinating all of the Zoom rehearsals because we did about a month of virtual rehearsals before we were able to meet in person. And that was chaotic, but kind of beautiful in a way. Like we would have people eating breakfast while other people are eating lunch and other people are eating dinner all in one call, talking about how to best be an awkward vampire. Or like, I remember one, because we have 4-ish Bias in the show, or like 5 actually, I think, because we had both understudies on that call, and we were just having like a lip biting practice and like how do we establish Bia's awkward mannerisms and stuff. And everyone, like, I think Eva was getting ready for bed, and like it was just very endearing in a way to see people from so many different places have such like a vested interest in something that means something to them and has for a long time. So I don't know, I think navigating that part of it felt really natural after you get to see kind of where everyone's passion is coming from. But the logistics were horrific. Like trying to produce a show from the US, like because largely like we were starting the process from here. That was happening in a country like I hadn't been to Scotland before, so I didn't really know what to expect. But then also the Fringe Festival, like it's absolute insanity. Luckily, we had some great contacts with our venue, so we were kind of getting like the answers we were thinking we needed and stuff. And we're like, okay, cool, like we're doing okay, except no. Like figuring out housing was so difficult. That took months, and people start like a year or more in advance planning any of their Fringe stuff. We again were on like a really tight schedule. We didn't contract with our venue until March of last year, performing in August. Like we knew we were arriving there in July, so we didn't have very long, and we were holding this casting process at the same time. So it was just so much. And like trying to make phone calls to over there, a lot of the time we couldn't. Like either there wasn't a number international numbers could dial out to, or like it's just such a busy time that we weren't getting a lot of responses. So luckily, any of the loose ends that needed to be tied up, once we got there, we had so many cast members that were willing to jump in and be like, oh, well, I have a contact for this, or like, why didn't you just do it this way and stuff. So we needed a bigger team, which we ended up getting through the most incredible, like loving cast of all time. But I mean, that part was really difficult for sure. And you are from the US, but have been over there now for school and what, like 4 years?
2 years, 2.5
4-ish years? Oh, Oh, okay. So you've been over there though for a while and have experience with French. Like you had a lot of ideas that were helpful, and we had a couple people who were just like, oh, like I've worked with this person before, like talk to them and stuff. So it was so necessary to have the the team that we had. But yeah, and getting it all put together was not easy. Like the set pieces and stuff we were trying to source, but we didn't know locally like where can we go and if will places deliver because it's Fringe and everything is so busy. So we were shipping things from like warehouses that were over there, but they were like US website. It was just a lot that going forward we won't do the same. But we needed to learn, you know.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know. What
think
would you say about the
I think a lot, if not all of us went into the process not really knowing what to expect. And I will
Mhm.
say that we all got in that room that first day when we were doing the sing through and the read through, and we were all so nervous.
Yeah.
And then we realized we're all nervous,
Mhm.
and that's cool. And then we ended up bonding so fast. I don't think I have
There,
ever bonded with a cast more quickly in my entire life than right
there
after
was
that read through.
such a sweet moment there because so it's, the whole thing is chaos, just like setting the stage, right? All of Dusk has been so far. But the read through, we were like, well, we need rehearsal space, but we how do we go about this? Because we were looking at the Fringe recommended rehearsal spaces, and so many of them were in London. Like, no, we have a week and we can't say go to London first and then we're going to come here. We had a couple people already living in Edinburgh, so we're like, that's perfect. But we were staying at a local university that we had contacted about rehearsal spaces, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll have something for you. But we didn't have anything like solidified until we got there. We had asked them, we were like, so like any updates on the rehearsal space? And they're like, there'll be something. When do you start? And we're like, in like 30 days. Um, so we ended up finding for the read through because we didn't have a clear answer yet on where we would end up rehearsing, which we ended up moving halfway through that process to a larger space, which was perfect. Like it was a great space for what we needed. Uh, but that whole experience of like going through rehearsals at that school, I think was really bonding for everybody. Um, but anyway, we didn't have our spaces yet. And we're like, where do we do a read through or a sing through? And realized that no one else was living in our building yet. So we were in a dorm building that happened to have like a conference room in it. Um, there's a, to paint the picture, a wall of windows that were all open because it was warm in there. And at one point, like during the sing through, the custodial staff was standing downstairs listening and clapping
Yeah.
everyone. That was really sweet. But there was a bonding moment I remember where everyone kind of like took a break for a second. We're looking around and we didn't know the campus or anything yet because we had just gotten there. So we didn't know like where to tell people go get lunch and all of that. And I asked if anyone wanted coffee. I was like, I have a French press like in my room in our kitchen. I was like, I don't really know how to use it. Like people were complaining about wanting coffee, and I was like, do you guys want coffee? And about 10 people followed to my kitchen. And I was like, okay, like, does anyone know how to use this
Know how
thing?
to do it.
Because I think I'm really bad at it. Mine's not good. And Allie, who happens to be, she was one of our ensemble members and one of our understudies. She happens to be a barista outside of her performance career. I was like, oh yeah, I got it. So there were what, like 12 of us in my kitchen.
Mhm.
This is day one, like we were just meeting. It's not a big kitchen. It was the weirdest layout ever. Just like crammed around a French press and bonding really well. Like everyone was like super chill, super nice. But that I felt for me like broke the ice really well because it was like stiff and kind of scary at first. I think for everybody, we're just kind of gathered around this long table. We've got our sound designer and our lighting designer sitting there like behind everyone on a couch, and it was I don't know. I was just kind of like looking around. I'm like, okay, so like we have to like do this now, I guess, you know.
Yeah, I
And
think
like, I don't know, so much of it was just new. Like Dan and I, who had been working on this project together for over a year at this point, I like we were living in a flat together and all that. I'm pretty sure though that was like the third time we ever met in person. And so like everything was just so new. And I was like, this is weird. Where are we? And
What are we doing?
what are we doing? And I was like, everyone here is like expecting something. Like this is new to all of us. But luckily we did know like tickets were selling well and stuff. And like that was such a vague thought. Like, cause I was like, I don't understand anything right now. But we're like, people are excited about it. Like, that's cool. We can share that with people. But it was, yeah, I mean, I think that was weird. I think everyone was really nervous. Luckily, it went well.
I think I remember just going up to people after the sing through and being like, "Oh my God, you're so talented. Like you're incredible." But then people were coming up to me and doing it, and we all just kind of ended up doing like the rounds, being like, "Oh my God, I'm so excited to work with you." And everyone was like, "Same." And then we all just had this like
Yeah.
crazy frenetic energy that carried us through to the performances.
Which I don't know. I mean, it started as unintentional, but I think it became like really important to me throughout the casting process. Like we had these Zoom kind of interviews sort of things. It was more of just like getting to know you calls for anyone that we were like, no, we like really want to work with them, but let's see like, are they interested? That sort of thing. And so many of, I mean, like everyone that we met with was incredible, but the people that ended up being in the Fringe performance, we just like kind of knew right away. And very fortunately, everyone ended up exactly where like I think we had envisioned them and wanted them. Like that there were just a lot of things throughout the entire process of the show that like I was like, this is like a universe thing because it feels right. And um, the cast was one of them, but kind of knowing like after people started accepting offers and stuff, who we were going to be working with, like it just kind of felt like we knew them already. I don't know. And then we would be meeting with new people and like, oh, they're gonna vibe really well with like this person. And like, I can't wait for them to work together, sort of thing, like not having offered them a role yet and them not having accepted, but just kind of feeling like, oh yeah, like this is a team. Like they need to be together, like all these people need to meet, they're gonna do incredible work together. So though the show is still developing and doing stuff, I think that the cast that brought the version of it that we performed to life was exactly who it needed to be. And they all needed to meet each other for whatever reason. Like I think that and I'm so glad that it actually ended up working that way because we did like a pizza night sort of thing the night before we started rehearsal. And as many people that could make it did, but it was still awkward, right? Like it was like quiet and people were getting along. And I remember I left to like go get the pizza or something. And I was a nervous wreck. I was like, in fact, I think like crying in the lobby and just being like, what are we gonna do? So I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, we were all a
Yeah.
bunch of nervous beans throughout the entire
Yes.
thing. We're like, so many things could go wrong, and then we were like, so many things could go right, and then so many things
Everyone
didn't go
was so
right.
supportive of each other though. Yeah. That was like one of the first things I was like, oh, these guys are like just loving individuals, but so supportive of each other and very protective too. Like I noticed that right away. I was like, you've known each other for 2 days, but you're like going to bat for each other. And that's so important. Like theater is such a team sport, but this process, especially, I feel like has been so collaborative. I don't know if you felt that, but I think everyone has contributed majorly and we're very open to it. It's like, no,
Mhm.
please. Like, that's been my favorite part about it, especially coming from a writing background where it is a lot more individual and it's like for the page, not the stage sort of a thing. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's not a process you usually invite people into. And writing for theater, like screenplays and stuff like that, that's an inevitable thing. Like you can't do it alone, which has challenged me in a lot of ways over the past couple of years. But I think it's been so good. Like the creativity that's come out of it for everyone has been astounding. There's been, I mean, like we're doing this podcast now, but there have been a lot of other projects that we haven't released yet, related to Dusk that people are getting to flex a lot of their creative skills through. Yeah, you know about the one. And like the amount of creativity for everybody, like Cosette's partner Wyatt got involved and has been the technical glue, everything.
Yeah.
It's been, yeah, the collaboration and the amount of respect and care, I think, behind that has been really inspiring and made all of the chaos worth it in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, we're months out from the project, and all of us are still in communication with one another, if not on a daily basis, on like an every other day kind of basis or
The
a weekly
relationships.
basis. Yeah, we've just it's just kind of continued to be a thing. And when we had to break away at the end of Fringe, it was really painful. It was really
Ooh.
painful having worked so tirelessly and so forcefully through this process, not just with the show, but with all the things that came with trying to navigate, maintaining mental health, maintaining physical health,
Yeah.
staying sane and, living your best life while at the Fringe, but also keeping up enough energy to do the show. And then, when we had the 2 show weeks, that was absolutely insane, and none of us saw that
Oh,
coming.
yeah. I mean, we hadn't planned on doing any 2 show days at all. We we're in the most insane and fortunate position, as far as I know. Because like I was always told, like you might sell 10 tickets per show, and that's what the Fringe is, and all of that. And we knew we were selling more than 10 tickets per show, just like looking at ticket sales leading up to it. But we had a space that held about 80 people, and we didn't expect 80 people to be there for every performance, especially like we were late at night. We performed at 10 p.m. We're like, yeah, I mean, like that's a good time for the show. And we think like for what the show was, we're like, that's like a good type of crowd that I think will show up for that. But we didn't expect a full crowd. And the shows sold out. Um, I want to say, was it a week before we opened? It was like
Yeah.
2 days of rehearsal or something like that, or into in-person rehearsal, which was insane. And we're like, we don't know what to do with this. And then our venue contacted us and was saying that people keep emailing and asking for tickets. Would you be interested in adding afternoon shows the last week of performances because um, we have a space for it? And we're like, well, let's talk to the cast. But I mean, if they're down, like we're down. And we did that kind of not, I'm glad that we did. I think everyone was glad that it ended up happening that way. I don't think any of us knew how tired we would be at the end of Fringe. And the venue, which has become just such a part of the Dusk lore, was an inferno. It was
Yeah.
so hot. So I mean, like, props to absolutely everyone for pushing through that. The performers were doing the absolute most to be able to get through the run and still deliver a performance that had energy for all of the audiences. But so we didn't expect for the show to sell out. That was really cool. Adding the extra shows made it so tiring for everybody, but I think an experience that hopefully was worth it for everyone. And it really bonded everybody because everyone's still in contact now.
Yeah.
um, I mean, like, should I paint the picture of the last night? Because it's so funny. Like the juxtaposition of the setting and the way that everyone was behaving was wild. So following the last show, we had to load out the venue and everything. And we're doing that, but then had planned because this has been the craziest process, right? We hadn't really had a chance as a group to spend a lot of time together outside of at work every day, which was all the time. So like we were seeing enough, but we weren't though, because like everyone would be so sad. Like they'd go back to their place that night and be like, I miss you guys and whatever, having just been with them for hours. So the last night we had planned on going out so everyone could kind of celebrate what they had just accomplished and everything. And the place that was selected was a local gay club. And we were all excited because we knew like, okay, like we'll have fun, we'll dance, we'll whatever. And I ended up getting there at like 2 in the morning or something because I was unloading the set pieces where they were being stored, and then came and it was just the most somber scene with the funniest background. Like it was a this long table of people holding each other and sobbing.
Sobbing.
I mean, I'm still heartbroken watching Eva and Dylan say goodbye. Like I can never get that image out of my head. It was horrible, but everyone's just holding each other, makeup running down their face, sobbing. And then you've got a couple people crying the same exact way on the dance floor behind them, just kind of like fist bumping with tears streaming down their face. And I was like, oh no. Like, and then immediately, like I was already emotional. Like we have so many pictures, I think, from kind of that whole week that the show closed, like before it closed and everyone kind of saying goodbye at the venue. And like final thoughts and like wrapping things up and stuff. And then as people sending pictures of them just like sobbing on the train or something. But specifically the scene at the bar when everyone was, I mean, like people are celebrating. This is the last night of Fringe. Like so many people were there. And so like from other groups, super excited. And then you've just got this huge group, because I think we were the biggest group of Fringe at a cast of 18, just sitting there sobbing at the front of the club. And then some people just on the dance floor. And that night ended up being like fun, but way too somber to actually really celebrate.
It was
But I
very,
think that meant, yeah, like it was apparent how much you guys all loved each other.
I actually didn't cry that night. I didn't cry until a couple days later about it. And I actually called my dad, because he was like, call me when the Fringe is done and we'll like talk. And I was like, Dad, I didn't cry at the end of the show. And he goes, what? You always cry. And I was like, thanks, Dad. But then I was like, yeah, I do typically cry. And I was like, what? I was thinking about it. I was like, why wasn't I upset at the end of the Fringe? And I think it was a mixture of things, because I really wanted to get to the bottom of why I wasn't so like as upset and as emotional as the rest of the cast. And I
Mhm.
was like, I'm gonna see these guys again. I'm gonna do this again with them. It's not gonna look the same, but I'm gonna do this again with them. And I was honestly so tired that I think if I had let myself cry, I would not have made it home.
Yeah.
I was just so like I was holding on like that wig by the end of the show, just like melted glue, bobby pins, and hope.
Yeah. I no, I relate and I understand completely. Because by the end of the run, I was like, I'm so excited to change things. I was like, I cannot. Because another thing too, like so fortunate and so grateful that so many people that wanted to see the show were able to see it and that we sold out. That was so unexpected. However, Dan and I couldn't watch the performances. There wasn't room. So we were like, how do we give notes and monitor the run of the show without seeing it? Like, we have no idea what's going on unless somebody tells us. Like, a very occasional number of times I was able to sneak in at the booth for like part of an act or something. But usually, like, we couldn't watch. And that was really hard, not knowing what was going on or what was changing. Like, seeing the last performance after seeing the first, I was like, I've never seen this before. Where did this
Yeah.
come from? It was so different. And there were things that I was like, okay, cool. So like we'll focus next time we rehearse it more on this thing, or like this thing will be changing and all of that. So we kind of, it was good to get, like, I think we saw like the very first show, the very last, and like parts of ones in the middle, maybe like a full one in the middle. And just watching it evolve and like our ideas of what was going to be changing were solidified kind of throughout the evolution of the performances. So by the end, I was so excited to like revive it and give it something like fresh and new. Um, but all of my emotions were for the cast. I was like watching like just how much coming together and working on something together has meant for this group of people is so moving. And so I didn't actually, I think I was like holding together pretty well too until, oh no, I know the thing that broke me, but I was holding together pretty well until a few days after we wrapped everything up and seeing everybody else like clinging to each other and crying. Like I would get emotional then, but not about the show ending or like the experience ending. Like I knew like things were changing and I was like, okay, next time it's going to be different and better and calmer and healthier and like all of these things, right? But then I was the last person in my flat. So I was living with Dan, our composer, and then Sarah, who played Jenny, Anthony, who plays Eglet, and Jason, and then Dylan, who plays Edwin. And I mean, like it just became so normal to have them around and stuff. Like it had like our flat had like such a vibe to it, right? And I was the last one there, and I walked into the kitchen. I was talking to Eve, who plays R, Via and Edwin's child, one of our narrators, who was very emotional. The show was ending, and I was holding it together well. I was like, okay, and she's sending me pictures of her crying, and I was like, I got this, I'm fine. I walk into the kitchen and see that they had left dishes in the sink, so it was like they really weren't gone at all. And then I was like, but they're not here. And then that's when I really lost it. So I mean, like it was sad. And knowing then like we have now these like teammates almost that are spread across the world. Like that's fantastic. However, they're across the world. Like knowing we're going home and it's going to be, okay, we're back to having these like 5-hour time differences between people and all of that. And like we don't know when it's happening again and stuff at that time. Like we really can't make like solid plans at the moment and stuff. So yeah, I mean, the whole process was very rushed, but it came together, I think, in the way that it was supposed to for the version of the show we were doing at that time and all of that. So yeah, it was really cool.
Well, since we've kind of discussed in a nutshell what the Fringe experience was, I mean, we're definitely going to have you back on later on and we can discuss, the craziness that happened. If we want to unpack some of the crazy that happened during the Fringe, I'm sure we will get into that when we have the ensemble on in a couple of weeks, which cannot wait for that unhinged energy to hit. But if you want to kind of tease what's happening next, what does 2024 look like for Wishbone Media and Dusk?
Yes. So at the end of 2023, which I think was still like part of, I mean, I don't think I've had a moment of clarity until January 2nd of this year for years. So I mean, my analogy, I was like, metaphor maybe even, I was like, it's like so many things in my life I've just started unintentionally in the deep end, and Dusk to this point, it's like the deepest end ever. Like it's like it feels bottomless, right? And then suddenly I'm in the shallow end chilling and I can see everything. It's fantastic. So
I can touch here.
yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm just like relaxing, I'm like, it's like a no depth pool, and I'm like lounging with so it's a lot more calm now, and we're working on planning the next phases of everything. But I think, what can I tease? At the end of the year, we released the Fringe Cast album and the pro shot of the show that we recorded at Fringe last year. Knowing kind of like, okay, this is probably the last time the show's going to exist in this form, and going forward, like, let's play with the format a little bit. Let's take all of the strong points and amplify them, and then the parts that felt to us and to audience members and cast members too, I'm sure, like they could use some revision, will be revised and maybe eliminated entirely. Like the whole structure, I think, is going to be a little bit different in order to make it stronger. I don't know how much of it I should tease. We're thinking, I don't know, you'll probably be introduced to some new narrators going forward. And I think it'll be a lot more banter just in general throughout the whole show. And you'll get to see a lot of, I think you'll get to see more musical genres present. So new music, new dynamics, that'll be really cool. I'm excited to work on all of that, especially with the cast once we're at a point where we can rehearse all of that. But what else? We're working on so many other projects. They are not about vampires and they are not parody. Very necessary for my sanity and everyone's, I think, just like creative process and stuff. We've been working on some other stuff that is either, I think, unexpected, maybe, I guess, following a Twilight parody musical, or just has a different kind of audience potentially. But I'm excited about that. Had a couple meetings about a project that one of our friends had originally written that we're now helping with. So there's a lot of new stuff to come. More Dusk content to come. We worked on a special project kind of throughout autumn of 2023 that has all sorts of the Dusk related chaos that you might associate the show with now. However, it brings a lot more humanity, I think, because you're getting to meet the cast a little bit more in depth. So that was fun. I think we're going to be releasing stuff and making announcements mostly on Instagram over the course of the next several months. And of course, now with the podcast, we've got a couple things up our sleeves.
There will be about 9 episodes in this season with potentially a few bonus episodes for other content. Anywho, so is there anything else you want to plug before we close out our first ever Dusk a Two Lit podcast episode, Morgan?
Follow everybody. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, the cast is all hilarious, so I would recommend keeping up with their content. But also, Instagram is typically where we post updates and stuff. So at dusk.musical. Or no, I'm so sorry. That's our email address. If you need to email us, dusk.musical@gmail.com. It's dusk_musical on all platforms. I believe the podcast is going to be living on YouTube, but we're going to be posting clips all over. There'll be clips on Instagram and on TikTok as well. So I think if you follow along with those accounts, you'll kind of be up to date on things as they're happening. We do some interactive stories on there. People love the AI casting.
What about the pro shoot, Morgan?
What
about the pro shoot?
Oh, yes. Of course. Thank you so much. So the album is available to stream on all music streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, all of those. And then the pro shot is available on Vimeo. But if you click on the link in our link tree, which I'm sure we can include below here, it is labeled pro shot, and you can purchase that. We might have some other exciting announcements coming soon about where the pro shot can be viewed.
Absolutely. We may have some things to tease as the season goes. But without further ado, thank you so much, Morgan, for being our very first victim on Dusk, a Two Lit podcast. It has been wonderful catching up with you. I have been your host. I have been your host, Cosette. And we will catch up with all of you snack cakes next week. Bye!